I'm Juan Mayor. I'm gonna be at NAMM! The greatest music festival in the whole world. The music industry can be pretty cutthroat. It can be full of fraudsters and 7-time Grammy award-winning artists that bug your house to steal your songs. That reminds me. Alexa, turn on the John Mayer security protocol.
Turning on John Mayer security protocol.
Very good. Come to the lost jungles of Anaheim for the NAMM, where you can meet the original Juan Mayor. I'll be hanging out with Chibson and Kaiser Caples. Everyone is welcome. Even you, John, you can come to the Kaiser Cable booth and wait in line just like everybody else to see me.
Hello, welcome. This is Meaningful Times with Friends, episode 37.
No, it's 36. It's 36.
No, we're on 37. I just released 36.
Really? Oh, right. Wait, I was right. Day after Christmas special, 36.
Yeah. What do you mean you were right?
This is 37.
Yeah, I was right.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
That was a good little Art Lord Jedi mind trick.
I got away with that. that was.
I was right. All right. Well, welcome, episode 37. Now that we clarified that, it's Bully D, Merely Jason, the Nathan Nation. I mean Dave. Welcome back, and this will be our first episode of the new year. Always behind the times, always irrelevant. Meaningful Times with Friends. And also, I want to give props to our sponsor. We can take credit for being the little extra leverage to helping the Dred Zeppelin documentary, A Song of Hope, 100,000 views. And thanks to our 100 views on that episode, I think we really are kind of turned the tide on getting the word out about the Dred Zeppelin documentary. So thank you to all those who've checked that out. And now, as always, we start off, this is what we do, man. We handle our shit. Who's sorry this week for anything? Anybody? Nobody sorry?
Nope.
All right. No apologies, everyone. Go fuck yourselves. Kicking off 2025 with a clean conscience. By the way, if you're a fan of Meaningful Times with Friends, but you caught on late and you're like, man, these guys take a while between episodes. And if you haven't watched any of our previous episodes, we have a complete lack of relevancy policy here at Meaningful Times with Friends, which keeps all our episodes fresh for you to watch. They're timeless. They're like the Twilight Zone. You can watch them at any time and they still apply.
Especially the episode about the My Pillow guy, because he's constantly relevant and in the news cycle.
Yes, in our efforts to bring him up and point out that this guy was the thing of the past, Spoolie D has been proven correct that the My Pillow guy, what's his last name?
Lindell.
Mike Lindell will not go away. He's herpes.
Somehow, still a dick.
He's contemporary herpes. And speaking of that, another cultural herpes is Star Wars. Kind of a surprise phenomenon, I guess. We were all children when it first came out. Episode 4, technically, as we learned later, because it was just Star Wars. Basically, Star Wars set the tone for what became franchise marketing. For the most part, anybody who took part in it, including the actors, everyone thought that George Lucas was insane. Because here was this story with all these strange alien characters. It's not science fiction. It's kind of more of a space opera, they like to say, even though there's no singing. It's a space drama. And somehow this movie, the little star movie that could, became a huge phenomenon, a huge hit. So much so that then they were able to make sequels and more sequels and prequels and then back to the originals and let's add some more shit and re-release them and all this kind of stuff. It will not go away. So it's been a phenomenon of sorts. And one of our members here who kind of touts himself as the coolest member of Meaningful Times with Friends, but he is the least involved in any of these movie franchise fanaticisms. But he is a fan of Star Wars. The Nathan Nation. So, Nathan, why don't you kick off Star Wars?
I think the very first movie I can remember seeing in the theater was probably The Empire Strikes Back. I was 5 years old. I think that movie came out in 80. I remember seeing it and having absolutely no idea what was going on, but thinking it was visually cool because I was 5. I definitely saw Return of the Jedi in the theater, and like I know you're supposed to shit on that one because the Ewoks were dumb as fuck. But like I said before we started recording, I was 8 years old. The Ewoks were cool to me. I didn't have a developed sense of this is stupid yet, so I loved it, and I still do to this day. Fast forward to 1998. I remember I was working at a radio station in San Jose, and we were covering on the morning show all these people that were camped out for weeks at the big movie theaters that used to be on Stevens Creek Boulevard by Valley Fair Mall. They're all gone now. I think there's housing there, but people camped out for weeks. And so I would go out there and interview them on the street, talk to all these people that we were sort of making fun of, sort of like Triumph, the insult comedian dog did back when those movies came out, making fun of those guys for being freaks who dress in costume and hang out of a movie theater. But they got to know us and they were cool. So the day the movie started, some people just gave the people on the morning show tickets. So we got to go see Phantom Menace the day it came out in a huge movie theater with a huge crowd that was charged up to see it. And that was like the first time I think I saw a movie where I tried to convince myself that I loved it because it was Star Wars and it had like this gravitas for me that it was like this favorite thing from childhood. And admittedly, the atmosphere was awesome. I mean, people were stoked that Star Wars was back and people were throwing beach balls in the theater and dressed like fucking Boba Fett and shit. But like the movie sucked. And I just remember going home kind of being like, did I like that? I don't know if I did. And I remember my girlfriend at the time was kind of pissed that I went and saw it without her. So we went and saw it again. And I conclusively was just like, wow, that Jar Jar Binks, I don't know what the fuck to make of that. There were things about it that were kind of cool, like maybe the pod races. I don't know. Anyway, as the years have gone on, I think I've come to the conclusion that what was important to my love of Star Wars was that I was a child. It's entertainment that I think is primarily made for children. And I think the rarity of it over the years initially is one of the things that made it seem so cool, is that it had gone away for years. And when it finally came back, we were starving for it. But now, through Disney, we're getting more Star Wars than we could have ever possibly asked for. It's not all that great. I mean, The Mandalorian, I don't know, some of it was cool, I guess. The new trilogy that came out, probably the last one was like 6 years ago or something. Like, I didn't even bother finishing seeing those. And there is some sort of disappointment to that. But again, like I said, I think I've had to just come to the understanding that I'm a nearly 50-year-old man trying to like stuff that's made for children. And like most of my Star Wars love these days is like this. I have a ton of T-shirts with Star Wars prints or things that are parodies of Star Wars. So there you go. Let's kick it off. Everybody discuss Star Wars.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Nathan. Very similar to Nathan, my first memory of Star Wars was seeing Empire Strikes Back in the movie theater. However, for some weird reason, I do remember I was familiar with the first one. So, like, I don't know what I actually saw first because, you know, first few years of life are a blur. We saw it at the Fremont Hub, and there were these people that came into the theater dressed as Darth Vader, Chewbacca, Luke Skywalker or something. And my mom distinctly remembered, I remember this too, near the end of the movie, this Darth Vader was standing right in front of us. I dug it. I think my mom kind of freaked out. Had this very similar experience as the Nathan Nation. Both enjoying Star Wars. I enjoyed Return of the Jedi as well. Wouldn't say that I was like, oh, I fucking love Star Wars. It was just, I thought it was cool. It was a kid. Totally into it. As time wore on and then the prequels were announced, I thought, yeah, this will be cool. And I think I've talked about it. We've talked about it on the show before, where the last time I was in line for anything was at Star Wars Phantom Menace. And we saw it at midnight, and I fell asleep. I believe I heard this somewhere else, but it's C-SPAN in space is what that felt like. A lot of Trade Federation talk. The coolest element that they didn't expand on enough was Darth Maul, because Darth Maul looked like a cool-ass character. He looked like some kind of extension of black metal in space, and then he's barely in the movie. He's played by Ray Park. He was the coolest karate in space, double-edged lightsaber, you know, all kinds of stuff, and yet he barely is just a blip in the movie, and it was kind of a waste. But I don't think the movie itself was intended necessarily for kids. I think Lucas had this burning ripped-off story that he was trying to tell, because it's a ripped-off story. Everybody's pointed out he's taking themes of Joseph Campbell. He ripped off the nuts and bolts of a Kurosawa movie called Hidden Fortress, and if you watch The Hidden Fortress, you can see pretty much the whole story of Star Wars in Samurai Japan. Phantom Menace sucked, but I didn't mind the Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith as much, but there still was this weird thing that I couldn't shake that I'm like, I did want to like them more than I actually did, and I'll still go back and try to watch them and enjoy them, and it's just not taking. And it kind of tainted the initial Star Wars. However, when the further sequels came out, I really did enjoy The Force Awakens. I won't lie, that one was really cool, but it's just a rehash of A New Hope. It pretty much follows sequel formula pretty closely, and I liked it. I also did like The Last Jedi. A lot of people were poo-pooing that. Last Jedi was Rian Johnson, and there was a lot of heated debate from the Star Wars fandom over that one. There were people that liked it or hated it. And then Rise of the Skywalker I saw in the theater. I remember sitting next to a dude that was annoying me at the theater, was not on our phones. And he was really not enjoying it, and he was annoying me before the movie even started. So his not enjoying it made me thoroughly enjoy the film more than I would have.
What was he doing? Was he like talking out loud? This sucks, or like?
Yeah, it's weird. This is a dude who I met at a movie at the Batman. It was this dude who, like, from a distance said, "Hey, anybody ever tell you look like Jason Momoa?" It was with my long hair. Or Aquaman. And I'm like, yeah. And then he started talking to me more, and I was just humoring him. He said, "Hey, you need to follow me on Instagram," and made me go to my Instagram and follow him, which I unfollowed not too long after because he then went to sit in his seat. I thought he was sitting in our back row where we were. It was an early release of the Batman, the newest Batman movie. And he wasn't sitting in our row. I thought he was with friends that he had in this row. He wasn't. He was talking to strangers in this back row. And then he went to sit in his seat, which was further in the front of the theater. And within the first 20 minutes of the Batman, which was not all that exciting, when it gets to the first fighting scene where there's actually some action, this shadow pops up right in front of me, and it's the guy in the middle of the movie. He's like, "Hey man, few notes up top here," and he starts giving me his fucking review during the most enticing part. I'm like, "Motherfucker!" And I just said, "Hey, can we talk after the movie?" And he said, "Oh yeah, we'll do that." So then he bounces, and I don't even stick around.
Dave had to interrupt his texting to tell the guy to stop interrupting the movie.
No,
Your talking is very distracting.
We're
Yeah.
He's like, I'm trying to text my friend Jason here.
My whole point of that was whenever I am doing something that could be construed as rude in the movie theater, it's not audible. I try to keep it to myself. Depending on where I'm at, that's what all I was trying to do at the Genesis Peorage movie.
We don't need to relitigate this. Come on.
Oh, yes, we do. Not when it gets brought up. You can't just bring forth this, and I'm not going to expand on it, all right? This is Mean Dave, The Force Awakens. So anyways, this guy, I end up seeing him on the bus, talking to people, to the bus drivers. He lives near me. I only know this because I see him from time to time. And then that's when it dawned on me. This was the dude who sat next to me at Rise of the Skywalker, because his whole vibe is the same. When he walked up to his seat's right next to mine. It's a sold-out theater. Some movie theaters, they have like a drink holder, and if you're in some seats, you have a drink holder to the right of you and a drink holder to the left of you. I had my drink in the drink holder to the left of me, but technically, the way the seats are ordered, your drink holder for your assigned seat is the one to your right. So he walks up and he stands in front of me and he goes, "Ahem." And I'm like, I don't know what he's humming about. And I didn't really like look directly at him. I just was like, "Oh, is that my?" And so I moved my drink to the other side, and he goes, "That's right." And he sits next to me. Yeah, it was just the most arrogant thing. So that was my Star Wars kind of thing. And I watched some of the shows. I didn't mind The Mandalorian and stuff. The thing about Star Wars that's just interesting to me is that it is a very mediocre franchise overall now by a lot of different measures. I mean, it makes the Die Hard franchise look better. And they keep milking as much Star Wars as they can. But a lot of it is, again, as Nate pointed out, it's for kids. And adults try to follow along with it. There are adults that, really do the mental gymnastics to stick with it. I just don't understand why it stuck with us for so long. Like, there used to be like a time where Star Wars and Star Trek were kind of like, neck and neck in like the fandom. And at some point, we kind of like let go of Star Trek. Maybe Disney's involvement has something to do with it.
Star Trek isn't like something that has merch.
Bullshit! What are you talking about?
Star Wars is like a merch, like it's all about the merchandise. Yeah, Star Trek not so much. Star Trek
not so much, but everything has merch now, man. There's Star Trek shit. They got uniforms that they sell and everything, man. I just don't think it's as much of a moneymaker, and it doesn't appeal to the kids. They want movies that appeal to families because that's more butts and seats. We talked about this in the franchise episodes and other movie stuff and whatever. But there's a newest show that just came out, Skeleton Crew, and it is just the Goonies version of Star Wars. It starts off in a suburb. There's a suburb on a planet in Star Wars. I watched like the first 1-2 episodes because I heard about it and checked it out, and it completely is aimed at children, which is cool, I guess. At this point, Star Wars just feels like grooming. So I don't know, weird.
Wait, grooming for what?
Grooming to buy more Star Wars.
Okay.
The grooming being, it's everybody loves this fucking word. It's not like Star Wars is trying to fuck your children, but maybe I don't.
Aren't they though?
Who knows? I'm just saying that it aims so much at children to get the children hooked so that then the parents are like, I remember Star Wars. It's not as good as I remember it. Yeah, because you're not a fucking child anymore. But that's what it's aiming for. I just saw Sonic 3 in the movie theater because I get bonus points on my movie app. The fact that that's even popular with children right now is maddening because it's a highly dated video game character. Sega's not even a thing anymore, and the movies are a hit with kids who never played the fucking video game. And I hate to say it, it's only good because Jim Carrey's funny in it. Like, I wish there were better vehicles for Jim Carrey to do his Jim Carrey shit because he was very entertaining in the movie, and I was like, God damn it.
You could say that about half of Jim Carrey's comedies. Like, if you threw anyone else in there, think about Ace Ventura. I think Howard Stern actually made this point. Like, he read the script and said, this is horrible. And if anyone else did it, like literally anyone else, it would have been horrible.
True. No, you're absolutely right. Maybe Dana Carvey. I don't know, at the time. All right, enough tangent. Merely Jason, your thoughts on Star Wars?
I grew up liking Star Wars a lot. I remember seeing Empire Strikes Back in the theater. I remember not knowing at all what it was we were going to see, and on the way in, seeing the movie poster for the Muppet movie and complaining that we weren't going to see the Muppet movie instead. And then seeing the movie and being just like,
yes, Star Wars, I'm in.
And, I was pretty much in for Star Wars forever as a kid. I was also a big fan of Star Trek. Eventually, Star Trek won the battle for my fandom because I was very excited for the prequels. And then I saw the first one and I had no problem saying this is absolute shit. And it just kind of ruined everything for me. It like retroactively made me dislike the Star Wars films because I was like, okay, this just shone a light on the fact that the only reason I liked it was because I was an immature idiot with no discernment. And then it just kind of like changed my opinion about Star Wars overall because I was like, wow, this is really lame and boring and stupid. I was still relatively neutral about it, but my feelings really changed about Star Wars when Mario became Star Wars mega fan #1 and became comic book guy from The Simpsons about Star Wars. He would read all of the extended fiction, what is it called? The extended universe. And then like lecture Gary and myself, oh, Jason Solo, and so on and so forth, and this and that. Oh God, I can't remember all the fucking names of the alien races and shit, but it was just like, just never ending, like, oh, and this happened, and then this happened, and then in the future this happens, and blah, 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 and all these other like organic spaceships, and I'm like, I don't fucking care. I don't want to hear about it.
Did he write fanfic too?
No, he didn't do anything like that.
I would love comic book guy Mario erotic Star Wars fan fiction.
I don't know if it'd be that good. Yeah.
I crawled inside of him like he was a tauntaun.
So that really made me hate Star Wars passionately.
Oh, God.
But then Mario, got really sick and was dying and so on. I ended up going to see the new trilogy films because he needed somebody to take him to see them. And so I would take him to see the new movies and everything. And then I was just kind of like, okay, well, with the benefit of turning my critical brain off, I was like, okay, these are fun. These are fine. And plus John Boyega was, hot, so I didn't mind watching him do stuff in the movies. I kind of liked those. I thought they were fine. All three of them. Diminishing returns, but they were fine. And I've watched like The Mandalorian. Most of it was fun, I guess. But I think a lot of both my love and my hatred of Star Wars were both born of like heavy baggage that I had shed. Like, I'm not surrounded by people who love Star Wars, so I don't have to be sick of it. I can choose to watch it or not, that kind of thing. So I'm not like forced into a Star Wars situation. It's easy to be neutral about Star Wars now. But I still think Star Trek is better, ultimately. So I like the style. Like, Star Wars is much more fantasy oriented, and Star Trek is much more sci-fi drama oriented and soap opera ish. Not space opera, but soap opera, like, human relationships, that kind of thing.
There's sex in space. Captain Kirk would hook up with the aliens. There was none of that in Star Wars.
One of those aliens that he hooked up with did a couple of hardcore porn movies afterwards. It's good shit.
More power to him.
I can't remember her name. Last name Pettyjohn. I highly recommend it for those of you not named Jason.
What Jason was talking about of shedding baggage. Again, that Rise of Skywalker. Okay, you have Jedi, you have these rules or whatever, and as much as you can kind of stray from them or add to it, and like, oh no, the Jedi, they have the powers to move things with their mind and all this other shit. When you start making it more like, oh no, now you can move through space independently of Carrie Fisher did something real weird, and I forget what it was. Like, the ship exploded, she did something flying through space.
I thought that was cool. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, I think part of my problem with the prequel trilogy is that it really started to show the limitations of the material, because when you start elaborating on it too much, it becomes extremely ridiculous. Like, I really enjoyed Yoda. Yoda was one of my favorite characters. I loved his Yoda syntax. I thought was great.
He was a Muppet. You wanted to see the Muppets, and you got
Frank Oz. Frank Oz ruled,
And Dave, he was the art lord of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, well, he was the art Jedi.
But one moment that caught my ear, when you have more Yoda, you have to have Yoda talking more, and younger Yoda is going to be more active Yoda, right? And so he's commanding troops, and at one point he says, "Around the survivors, a perimeter create." And that is just like, the fact that they had somebody say that, and like in a moment of huge drama, that revealed to me the weakness of Star Wars. Like, that's where Star Wars falls apart. You set up this like ridiculous, cute little creature character that talks in a funny way, and now you're gonna like make him like be the commanding officer of all these troops and say some stupid shit. That's where Star Wars falls apart for me, or at least the prequels.
I want to say there was some actual like foreshadowing of the terribleness of the prequels, and that was in leading up to it. They re-released the original trilogy with more shit. They added digital shit, and none of it enhanced the movie. That was, I think I've talked about it before, when Mario and I dropped acid and we saw one of them, Empire Strikes Back or something, in the movie theater. Fact is, I really enjoyed kind of the raw aspects of the original trilogy because it was all in camera special effects. And in the age of digital, it's like, just move along with your digital shit. And to me, one of the things I didn't like about the prequels was that rather than just adapt the story to what you initially set out to do with your first trilogy, limitations and all, instead your prequels look like technology was flourishing at a higher level than your initial movies that came out. So, and I get that you had limitations and all that, but why not just try to make something feel consistent with your first trilogy? It's just harder and harder to suspend disbelief. But again, if you're marketing to kids, they don't know the difference, because again, just like when we first saw Empire Strikes Back, we saw it, we're like, yay, and then the Ewoks come out, yay, and meanwhile the older kids are like, those Ewoks are fucking stupid. It's like, yeah, they ain't for you, they're for the little dipshits like us, because I enjoyed the Ewoks too. Remember the scene, the big tough scene to watch when the Ewok was holding the wounded Ewok and it died? Man, that was sad, wasn't it? On that note, Spoolie D, let's hear your merciless take on Star Wars.
Yeah, I spend very little time thinking about Star Wars. It's like one of those relationships. At first, it's like all exciting, and then it just gets routine, and to the point where you wake up one day and all affection and love is gone. The first Star Wars movie I saw was a Star Wars movie because I went to this really small private school and they had 3 videos. They had Annie, The Wizard of Oz, and Star Wars. And so, like, if there were more boys there than girls on a rainy day, guess what movie I've seen about 35 times? The original Star Wars. Well, first it's super boring because it's just like dudes wandering around on Nathan's shirt, the Jawas, like the whole thing was like way over my head as a little kid. I'm just like, what the like this is super boring. I thought there was like space fighting. Then eventually it gets cool. And then rinse and repeat. And then in 3rd grade, we went on a field trip, same school, to see Return of the Jedi. And I would say the thing I've gotten out of the whole Star Wars universe was probably my love of movie theater hot dogs. That's a guilty pleasure. I discovered that when I saw Return of the Jedi. And I don't think I've ever been the same. I'll still eat those nasty things. There's something about the soggy bun, the movie theater, like corn syrup ketchup. I don't know. I love movie theater hot dogs. And I remember that time, I think the Return of the Jedi was like at the peak cultural influence. That's when Reagan like came out with his Star Wars defense mechanism. They tried to make it like, even on the news, it's just fucking ridiculous propaganda looking back on it. But it actually showed like satellites intercepting missiles out there and calling it Star Wars. And
Didn't it fail miserably?
Yeah, I mean, well, it was all bullshit. And then if you guys have ever seen Moonraker, in a universe of preposterous movies, this may be the stupidest James Bond movie ever. That Vandal song, Master Race in Outer Space, that was literally the plot of Moonraker. This dude wanted to bring all of like the beautiful people into outer space and then cleanse the earth. I don't know if it was like the nuclear holocaust or a virus or whatever. And then so he could repopulate with the beautiful people. There was a space fight that had that guy, Richard Keel, with the metal teeth out there. And he finally realized, like, I'm not one of the beautiful people. Then he turned on the guy, and that's what turned the tide. At a certain point in our youth, we were just marinating in this Star Wars soup. And when you're a little kid, it's fine. And I think this is kind of what Dave was saying. As you get older, you kind of realize, wow, Mark Hamill's a horrible actor.
Good voice actor, though.
Is he?
Yeah, he's the Joker in the Batman animated series.
I used to say that. I used to say Mark Hamill's a terrible actor, but then I realized, it was a terrible character. Mm-hmm. It wasn't so much Mark Hamill. I think it was the character, because then you see when Hayden Christensen was in the prequels,
he's a bad
like
actor.
A really bad actor.
You're right. Hamill was similar to Christoph Waltz, who Tarantino discovered in Inglourious Bastards, and he's great in everything that Tarantino does because his style of acting works really well in those. But then you see him in anything else, it doesn't work as well. I think Hamill works well in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, I think you guys are right. But it's just this Luke Skywalker character is such a brooding drip. Mm-hmm. And I would say like the peak of the entire franchise was when he first gets to Dagobah and Yoda's just absolutely fucking with him. I was legit like laughing. Like that was hilarious. And I think it's been downhill ever since that scene. But I've literally seen all of them. I've seen Rogue One. I've seen the Solo. I never bothered to like go out of my way to watch it, but like, I don't know, there was always people like inviting other people to go see them. So I've seen them all. The thing that strikes me the most is like just regular grownups who are like super, super into Star Wars. They remind me of like grownups that are super, super into going to Disneyland, even if they don't have kids. And it's just like, what is like broken in you? What hole are you trying to fill with this weird fucking melodrama universe? Because again, to Jason's point, it's not Star Trek. Like Star Trek is fucking deep, it's complex, it's layered. Every time they add a new series, there's a whole new dimension to it. It's like a really thinking man's like science fiction, where this is just schlock.
I think it has to do with the marketing to appeal to kids. Again, the grooming.
I just think there's this fucking hole in some people and they just shove like crap in it, whether it's like Star Wars or Disney or fucking Taylor Swift.
And I'll give you a story that's related to what you're talking about. I think because I wear so many Star Wars shirts, I think it misrepresents my level of Star Wars fandom to a certain degree, where I get people who are very enthusiastic about Star Wars coming up to me and wanting to talk to me. An example, November, my wife and I went down to Santa Barbara and stayed at a fancy hotel. She works for the chain, so we stayed there for free. The guy who helped us bring our bags to our room saw my Star Wars shirt, and I made the mistake of engaging with him. And he was like, I'm in this whole Mandalorian like society that we've created, and here's my pictures in my phone of all the little Mandalorian outfits I've made by hand, and I'm going to Germany for a convention that we're all going to fucking have this Mandalorian thing next month. I mean, dude was deep into it. I got way more than I bargained for by just engaging with the guy. So yeah, what you're saying, there are an awful lot of adults out there who are pretty deep into it. And as much as I love Star Wars, I'm left kind of like, whoa, I don't get what you're talking about, man. Right. Whatever floats your boat, you know? I mean, if you like to dress like the Mandalorian, cool. Whatever.
I think it's diagnosable. I don't think it's okay. I think it's a cry for help. I live next door to this lady who is my kid's nanny. That's kind of cool. She would dress up like a stormtrooper and like go visit kids in hospitals. And that's where she met all the men in her life too, because she was like the only woman. She'd kind of like found a Moneyball type hack where she could just find endless dudes and they all could fix cars. She definitely had a good scam going with that stormtrooper thing. She's like 4'11" too, so it looked ridiculous. I just don't think it's that great. Every minute I live, I like it like proportionately less. But I don't feel that strongly about it. Just people who are that into it, to me, that's a little bit of a red flag because I think you're papering over something in your heart with the Force.
It's got me eating movie popcorn I had sitting around. Nice. A lot of people blame Star Wars and, I guess Jaws to some extent of like ruining cinema, mainly Star Wars for kind of inventing the franchise aspect of movie making and marketing and all of that, creating the blockbuster, that kind of shit. But I think more or less a lot of Hollywood's always still sore that George Lucas was just smart about taking charge of the rights to all merchandising. And because it was a hit, these corporations were like, we're never doing that again. We'll always make sure that we have control of any merchandising because that dude made a lot of money off that shit. But yeah, it is the most mediocre of all of these franchises, and it's a shame because it was the one that kind of kicked it off. But in the end, yeah, it's really just for kids, So anyway, now let's move on to some heavier fare. Our next topic, and it's going to be tough. We here at Meaningful Times with Friends have a lot of respect for words. It's come up in our chat a little bit over the fact that words these days, some words are put in word jail, word prison, if you will, life sentences. They're no longer allowed. But basically, certain words, primarily with slurs, we knew they were bad words. They're, terrible words, not cuss words, talking about hurtful words. The words that denigrate someone for their race, their gender, whatever the hell, you go further, their sexuality. But it's extended into another word that then dabbles in ableism. Not dabbles, just flat out ableism. Basically, what I decided was let's have a law and order special word unit debate. On one half, merely Jason and myself seem to err on the side of just kind of like what we talked about science before. Things change, and sometimes words that once were kind of acceptable in certain ways can be let go. Kind of move it along, kind of grow with the times, grow the fuck up. Star Wars ain't forever. Nathan Nation kind of has more of like a thought on it. That was my impression. Spoolie D feels the strongest on this.
We should get rid of all words. We should just make eye contact.
Stop distracting from the seriousness of the matter. I'm going to move this to our prosecutor, which is merely Jason.
Well, my thoughts on this are I voted not to talk about it at all because next episode we're going to talk about whether hot dogs are sandwiches.
Fuck this word thing. Let's get into this hot dog.
What's wrong with that debate either, man?
Way better than fucking
that will be a topic.
Hey. Because these are fucking stupid podcast topics that get brought up endlessly. All you ever see on the internet, if you go down to any comment section of any YouTube fucking video or any Reddit thread, eventually it's going to get to somebody taking issue with pronouns, with policing language. We're not allowed to say this anymore. We're not allowed to say that anymore. It's ridiculous. Why can't people stop being so fucking sensitive? And ultimately, the whole debate is fucking pointless, and I hate it, and I just don't want to have to be engaged with it. And my whole thing was, I'm not going to sit here and not talk about it, but I am going to sit here and talk about how I think we should skip it, because I just don't see the point in engaging in discussion about it. It's absurd.
Okay, so that's just on the topic alone, but also specifically...
It's very fucking simple. There's nothing wrong with having compassion for other people and for considering other people's feelings. And your desire to say whatever you want to say that might offend somebody else is fine. You feel that you need to say particular words that are hurtful to other people. Do it. Nobody's stopping you. Nobody said you are not allowed to say this. And if they did say that, you're allowed to say, well, yes, I am allowed to say it. And that's fine. It's all pointless discussion. Say what you want, but then you got to deal with the consequences. And sometimes the consequences are 30 people telling you you're a fucking asshole.
Agreed. Case closed. I agree with Jason. I don't agree with Jason that we shouldn't talk about it, but I agree with Jason's conclusion. 100%.
All right. Well, chat doesn't
He's
say
right.
that.
No. I'll get to it. Go ahead, prosecutor.
No, I was lead prosecution.
Throw me in the lake and see if my body floats.
I'm the chick that stands alongside Jack McCoy in any Law and Order episode who just kind of like just adds like, yeah, that's right. So let's get to our neutral Switzerland, Nathan Nation.
Similar to our discussion of 80s movies that in one way or another have been banned, what was said during that episode, I think applies to my feelings on this. Context matters. Listen to what people are saying. If someone is joking, they're making a joke. They are not hurting someone's feelings in that joke necessarily, and it's important to take context into account. You can edit out what I'm going to say, but the word that kicked all this off was, okay, calling someone who is mentally disabled that word is unacceptable. I agree with that 100%. Saying that a movie you hate is not insulting someone. Saying a song you don't like is not an insult. You have to listen to that context. Words can have different meanings. And I was trying to think of something similar to this because I don't use the R word outside of my home. My wife and I will be sitting watching TV and go,
He's at home right now, like using
it. However, there was a discussion that probably started about a decade ago about whether or not it's acceptable for you to use the N-word while singing along to a rap song you're like, if you're not black, okay? So if you're sitting in your car driving to work and doing that stupid thing with your hands that you see people doing when they're rapping along, every one of you who's watching this right now that likes hip-hop, you say the N-word when you sing along to the rap songs that you like, if you're not black. You do. Don't lie about it. You're not saying the N-word in a way that means you hate people. You're not using it in a racist manner. You're singing along to a song and using it in the context of hip-hop. That's the context that needs to be taken into account in this. You are not a bigot by singing along to a hip-hop song, most likely. And so I'm not one of these people that's angry at people who are word police. I'm not angry at people for feeling strongly about these things, but I'm just tired of listening to motherfuckers. There was a time when we sort of made fun of social media, like the narcissism of the whole thing, and people doing selfies and taking pictures of their fucking meals and having pictures of all their vacations and sort of crafting this image of themselves. And that eventually moved into Twitter, which is people cultivating an image of themselves being trolls, being racists, being these social fucking warriors who want to fucking be everyone's fucking helper. And I'm just tired of everyone wearing their fucking little causes on their sleeves. If everyone would just shut the fuck up and listen once in a while, I think it would be a better world. That's all I got to say on the matter.
Love how it started calm and then it got heated. It got a little worked up there in the end.
Oh, I enjoyed that. That was hilarious.
A little response, though, to the discussion of the R word of the context thing. It's kind of moved beyond context. I work with the Comedians with Disabilities Act. We deal with a lot of people with disabilities, and if there's anybody who's probably the most ignored of a lot of different marginalized groups and all that is the disabled. And not all of them really can speak up for themselves completely. Not because they're deaf, spoolie D, but more the fact that it's easier to think that saying the dreaded R word, that it's not as offensive because its ramifications are not as feared. How much do you fear anybody who hears you say that word and the consequences of that? And depending on who you're around, that whole joke of like, you got to look around to see who hears you saying something.
Yeah, I don't mean to be racist, but
exactly.
Yeah, that whole situation, yeah.
And the fact that most people do not fear the disabled. That's the word that people are like, oh, this thing's getting out of hand. And it's like, again, pointing to the initial argument from our prosecutor that I agree with, even to a point where, yeah, I could roll my eyes at first, but I'm like, you know what? In the end, sometimes it's just like, yeah, grow the fuck up. Things change. It's not that hard to deal with, pronouns and all that kind of stuff. Just to accept people, have compassion for other people that are different. These are how these things evolve, because there was a time where even the N-word was used in regular, sitcom television. Like they were trying to point out that it was wrong and that it was used in context in characters that identified as racist or anything else like that. I love it. They identified as racist. But that it was acceptably used in a context that people weren't troubled by its general use. But then as time wears on, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, do we really need to? I guess. And me personally, I think, yeah, sticks and stones, break your bones, words, or whatever. But at the same time, society is society, and I just like to get along with shit. And I like Mark Norman's joke on the whole matter, and it's a joke. It's not something I take seriously. There ought to be a speakeasy where you can go in and say all the words that you're not allowed to say. And the more that you tell people that they can't do something, the dumbest aspect of the culture is going to want to do it. So you're going to have that either way. But I think in the end, if you want to show compassion for people in a conscientious sense and not like try to police others, it's just more personally. And because, again, I've learned a lot more from being part of the Comedians with Disabilities Act. Not one of these people who says, hey, I have a relative who's this, so I can say what I want. It's the same argument of like, I got black friends, so I can blah, 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 blah. And I'll be perfectly honest, I don't know if I've ever really rapped a song to myself. I don't really rap along with a lot of shit.
Dave only uses that word when he's climaxing during sex.
Yeah, exactly.
But not rapping.
Yeah, hard art too. No,
God.
I always thought it was dumb even way back then. I'm not from the hoods. I don't sing along with a lot of shit either. So I don't feel comfortable saying things I don't normally say. The word that I would say, I mean, I've definitely said the dreaded R word growing up. But there was another word, gay slur, said quite often.
It's called the F slur now. I had to look it up because somebody was saying an F slur. He kept saying F slurs. I'm like, what the hell is an F slur? And I had to look it up, and that's what it's called now.
Figure it out, Jason. Jeez.
Yeah, the F word's already taken, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. You got to say F slur. But there's a rule that I liked by a comedian, Sammy Obeid. He's a friend of mine. I like this joke, but it still doesn't justify. He says, if you've been called something, you should be able to say it. And based on that logic, I should be able to say any of these fucking slurs because I've been called all.
Chinaman.
Maybe not that one, but I wouldn't say that one because it's really not that effective.
Does the cleaning product Spick and Span still exist?
I don't know.
I'd be very curious to know.
All right, now let's get to our defense attorney, Spoolie D.
Yeah, no, I agree with Jason. Like you have, and I actually agree with what you said too. So not all of it. There's a very good point that you made though. So there's two things, and they're tied together.
Oh, there it is. It still exists.
That'd be cool if you did that Bob Dylan and Excess thing, where he's just like doing cards of like racial slurs while we're talking. So what Jason said is absolutely correct. You can say whatever you want, and there are consequences. Most of the consequences are social, right? Like people aren't going to want to talk to you. And then what you said, Dave, was really interesting, was that nobody's afraid of like special needs people. In full disclosure, I used to work in the field. And it was interesting. I worked at a camp for the developmentally disabled, which was the term at the time. But the chairs, this was not in California, this is in Illinois. The chairs like had written on it from a long time ago, East Bay Camp for the Crippled. That's a word like nobody uses anymore. But also like nobody uses the word ascot in polite company either. Like there's certain words that get antiquated. Like you don't name people Opal anymore, right? Or Bernice. And I think that was part of what Dave was saying, is certain things just kind of like go out of fashion. But I think what you said, Dave, is like nobody's afraid of the developmentally disabled, which is precisely why, Nathan, I never, ever use the N-word under any circumstances, musically or not, because of exactly what Dave said. And it's tied to what Jason said, right? Because words have consequences. So do I give a fuck if Dave gets mad at me for using the R word? No, because Dave and I are always going to be friends and we go at each other. And that was the consequences, or what? Like me and Dave yelling at each other? That's just called a fucking Tuesday.
We just get into a sarcasm battle.
But if I'm out there fucking throwing the N-word around, there are some dire consequences. And I don't think a jury would be sympathetic to my cause. So if you play all this shit out, Jason's 100% right. And so is Dave. Now, the other part about like using the R word, I agree with Nathan, which is you're using it as a metaphor and more of an exaggeration, right? You're saying something so dumb, like it's this, like it's basically to be like back in the day, it's an IQ level, it's an IQ threshold. I don't know if it was 70 or whatever, but that's what you're saying. You're using it to basically exaggerate a point, saying this is so lame, it's this, right? And same thing with the F word, the other, what is it called? F slur, which I don't use anymore either. I think it's gone to the point. No, I absolutely do not.
You're afraid of a dude sucking your dick in response? Is that?
Well, then I'm just thinking. No, I think that I'm afraid of it decreasing my chances. Actually, the OT word, I never liked it except in the Fetus. Was it Fetus, Jason, with the song English F slur?
Oh yeah.
And I don't sing along with that either.
The song's called Nothing Man, but
yeah.
Well, okay. Wait a minute. You say that you don't use the F slur anymore
with the hard gotch.
Real hard.
I have two friends that, full disclosure, have been known to be sucking each other's dicks, and we do go at each other pretty hard with that. But it's a good-natured, it's consensual, not with the sucking each other's dicks thing. That's consensual.
Well, you say you don't use it. Why?
I don't like it. This is a personal preference. Whereas if I call someone FAG, like I would never call Jason that, but like if I call these two dudes it, because that's kind of our game we play with each other, just different ways to call each other gay. And people in the audience may find that distasteful, but whatever, go fuck yourselves. But the got, for some reason, this is just personal preference. When you add the hard "ot," it seems more hateful, right? Like playing around calling someone an FAG, it's just perception, which is this tying this whole thing back together. Which is just like, it's different people's perception of like what the word means, which is kind of Nathan's point, is like context and perception. If you have three guys that clearly do not have any issue with gay people calling each other that as like almost like a word game, then whatever, you guys don't get it and you guys don't think it's funny, that's fine. That's up to you. But like if I'm using a word and Dave objects to it because he feels like he needs to stick up for his community, like that's fine.
Not even so much my community as much, but here's my point though, is that I don't know if you noticed this, Spoolie, but you're kind of erring on a side of compassion to some extent. I have the same relationship with certain people who are involved in stuff when you know that it's like in the context when we're fucking around and we both know that this is like a taboo kind of thing, but when people sort of like do speak up and say, yeah, I'm not, the same thing with people don't like the word anymore. And it's from that community, and I know people that are little people who prefer the term little people as much as it does sound weirder, but it's been more accepted and all of that. But even within that community, there's people that don't necessarily agree. So if a community speaks up and they prefer to either kind of retire a word as much as possible or anything like that, how much do you think that should be respected? And I get that you got, kind of your little thing with your friends, but you're feeling this way about one specific word, but this other word, you're kind of like, well, this is context. And so it's kind of, I don't know. It's
That's my choice. I'm not going to fucking bend over backwards because somebody has decided that this is no longer like socially acceptable to use a certain word. And I understand, like, I'm socially aware enough to know there's situations where it's not wise to use certain language. But at the same time, it's a lot of people, like, especially with the R word, you're not really offending people who are developmentally disabled. It's other people who are deciding to be offended on their behalf.
There's a word that we don't have to hear a whole lot, specifically me and Nathan, but it was a very common word to refer to immigrant people of Latin descent, and that was it was very accepted and still is used to some extent in certain areas, even within the community. And yeah, I can tell in context whether somebody really means to be hurtful, but I was also in a Mexican restaurant years ago, and my British grandmother, who was going blind, who in the 50s was married and had sexual relations and several children by a Mexican man, and talking about sometimes back then, she refers to something and refers to and the wetbacks, and she said so using the term from back then. Meanwhile, realizing where we're at and all that, I'm like, Grandma, shut the fuck up, all right? What the fuck are you, and because in her mind, she's not saying anything offensive using a term that was accepted. This bitch just doesn't get out, and she's going blind, too. She's old, she's going blind, and I have time to explain to any of the Latin people in the area who might have heard, like, this bitch banged a fucking Mexican when it wasn't cool, all right, and had kids by it, all right? She's all good. She has Mexican in her, literally. But I don't have time to go into all that. Luckily, I wasn't eating any food that day. Who knows if anybody heard and tampered with any food. I really don't think anybody heard. And you're dealing with time of the past, time of the present, somebody who's not trying to be intentionally offensive, but who is. And there are people around who do know that that's not to be said. So that's why I kind of like, when it comes to the mental gymnastics of like trying basically to just sort of be like, hey, I'm not meaning any harm, when it's like, yeah, but it still pisses people off, and not just the people on people's behalf. It does piss off the literal people themselves who might be part of that community. So it is a tired argument. I will agree with Jason on that.
Yeah, and I agree with Jason on most of this.
All right, we didn't solve anything. I think we talked about a lot that I'm going to have to edit. Be a lot of beeps, a lot of bloops, a lot of what have you.
I think we learned a lot about Nathan, actually.
Apologies to Jason. There's our apology for the day for having to even put you through this, Jay. Sorry. And look at him. He's texting.
No, I know. That's the ironic part. Like, you go on this whole thing about trying to
on
be
his phone.
I'm thinking about the fucking phone in the movie theater, and Jason's like dissing this whole topic by being on his phone during the podcast.
Let him, man. No one, he's entitled to that, man.
Exactly.
Fucking phono. Big phono.
In one ear and out your mother.
I'm going to turn that into a slur. You're a phono. Yeah. All right, moving on. Next topic, our song. You know, for all of the thought that we try to bring about conscientiousness, our discussions and all that, this was Spoolie D's pick this week, and I'll be damned if this wasn't the least thought about. You know, a lot of times when we pick a song, whether good or for ill, there's some meaning, some thought behind it. This just seemed like it was plucked out of thin fucking air because it's the holiday season, and Spoolie decided to pick a song that I never heard until this was brought up. I'll give my thoughts on it in a second, but Spoolie D, introduce our song.
Yeah, so where I live, Christmas music starts early, and then it just keeps getting worse. So, like, it starts with one station, like November 1, and then a week later, another station converts to Christmas music, and another one, until there's, like, 5. At a certain point, you get burnt out, and one of the stations that has a lot of deep cuts is the R&B station in Charlotte. So I was throwing it on just to get any sort of variety. I was driving to the grocery store with my family, and I was kind of, like, half listening until I heard something about watching Santa smoke crack. And then I heard Onyx, and then I got interested because I've always thought Onyx was hilarious. I won't go into any of the lyrics. I'll just say this, like, that song, I went back through it a couple times, and that song is a lot like this podcast, like in a lot of ways, because there's no like unifying point of view during that song. It was like, hey, Reverend Run, what's your take on Santa? Hey, Snoop, what's your take on Santa? And they're just kind of like rotating around, and I'll just summarize that and pass it on. So like, Run's take was like, we should help the poor, and then I'm just going to take a weird shot at Jews. I don't know if you noticed that, but like Santa looked at the rabbi, I was like, I don't know what's up with you, dude. I first heard the chorus. What's the lady's name? Justine Simmons. And she said she wanted a benzo under the tree, and my mind immediately went to like muscle relaxers. But then I realized like that's more of a white lady thing. So her whole take was just like she wanted a Mercedes, and I think she kind of wanted a mustache ride from Santa, if I could read between the lines. Mace just wanted everyone to know he didn't grow up with a chimney. Like, that was very important. Puffy showed off his musical talent, proving why people are so suspicious of why he's famous in the first place with his verse. Snoop made it about hair care and gang violence, talking about the enemy coming down the chimney. Salt-N-Pepa called out Santa as a false idol and encouraged everyone to forego sneakers for Jesus. And then Onyx, Sticky Fingers, best name ever, basically blamed the Grinch for him jerking off on Christmas. That's fucking amazing.
Fredro Starr was in that too. Fredro and Sticky both sounded similar. I mean, Onyx was always a yelling group, so I thought it was only Sticky Fingers, and then I was like, no, that's Fredro Starr who kicked it off.
He called him by name. He called Sticky by name. But honestly, I skipped him because I couldn't make fucking heads or tails of what he was talking about. And then finally, as the fucking conclusion, Keith Murray blows the lid off of Santa Gate. He's just like, yeah, Santa's not real. And that was the end. So anyways, in conclusion, it was too long. But I liked it. It had a very good, meaningful times with friends parallel.
Interesting. All right. Well, let's go around. Nathan Nation.
I would have to say this is good for a Christmas song. I wouldn't say it's the strongest hip-hop song out there, but in terms of Christmas music, yeah, right on. It was diggable. Better than 99% of the other Christmas music that's out there. I'm not thoroughly educated on hip-hop in general, so I didn't know who like half the people were rapping on this. I've heard of Mace, but which one was he? I couldn't pick up on... Was he in the video, or was he not?
No, he wasn't in the video, but he's got a voice like he's on Quaaludes.
And so Diddy was also not in the video. The Snoop part was my favorite part. I actually am a fan of Snoop, and I thought his part was the best part. Like Spoolie said, he rhymed enemy with chimney, which was pretty fucking rad. And he's just smooth in terms of lyrics. I just like his flow in general. I didn't like the Onyx part at all. Just because whatever those dudes are talking about is impossible to figure out. Like, what the fuck are they talking about? I don't know. Could have been about Christmas or anything else. I don't know. Yeah, in general, I gave this about 3 or 4 listens, actually. I kind of dug it.
I didn't make it past Snoop Dogg. But not because I disliked the song, but because I work at a grocery store. And so I basically was going through about 2 to 3 weeks of nonstop Christmas music. So I really have a very low tolerance for Christmas music right now. But I made it through Snoop. I enjoyed Snoop's verse. The chorus was cute, but then it got really irritating because it was like verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, verse, chorus. And it just got really irritating hearing it over and over again. I can't imagine like listening to the whole song with that chorus repeating over and over again. Like, there's no variation. But it was fine, whatever. 3 weeks of nonstop Christmas music, like all day, every day. It gets to you. I couldn't take it. Sorry.
I think it's going to be the quickest song recap that we've had, because this is one of those songs that was clearly just like whipped up to cash in, trying to get that Mariah Carey money, because Mariah Carey, it's like a running joke. It's memes and all that every year about the money she makes off her Christmas hit. I think they even have a special around it and all that. There's a better Christmas song for hip hop, and that's Christmas in Hollis. It's still used, widely used. Run DMC. Initially, when Spoolie gave it to us, he said it's Santa Baby by Snoop. And when I looked that up, it's credited as a Rev Run song. And he kicks it off. The beat's dope. When I listen to hip hop mostly, I'm not really listening to the lyrics. I'll be perfectly honest. I listen to the sounds of a voice. There's some cool lyrics. Really just the beat has to be cool. And I listen to House of Pain's second album. Verses are really fucking whack on that shit, but the beats are dope. That's why I like it. And the sound of the voice is pretty cool, even with the dumbass rhymes that are on it. So then here we get this song shot to us where the beat is dope and should have been used for a better song. And all of these verses are literally just phoned in for Christmas-related aspects. None of them tie into each other. The only thing looping it together to the point of annoyance is the chorus of Santa Baby by this, singer who I don't even know if that's the same chick in the video who's singing. Not everybody even showed up for the video, for fuck's sake. They have some people in it, but they're filming it on location wherever they're at and then shot them the footage, but Mace couldn't be in it.
Was the little kid in the video supposed to be peeping at his parents?
Yeah, I know.
Having sex through the keyhole? That was a little weird.
Yeah, exactly. It was weird. That was the first verse after Runs, too. I didn't care for the song until Onyx showed up, and not because I liked the Onyx verse, it made me laugh so hard.
Exactly.
Just hearing them.
Yeah, what the fuck are they talking about?
No one cared what anything beyond slam. No one gave a shit. It was slam dun dun and then I think they worked with the band Biohazard. They were like on that rap metal crossover. They're like, hey, we're friends with Biohazard, and like we're friends with Onyx, and it didn't really take as well. They're both on the Judgment Night soundtrack working together. There were too many artists, and then you kept having to go back to that chorus just to, hey, remember, this is about Santa Baby. A hook that sings Santa Baby in a seductive manner, and then every single one of them is in some other fucking universe about Santa. All right, so this is like the Santa multiverse of hip-hop.
If all the rappers aren't working in unison and each part is separate, is it still considered a cipher? I'm still trying to figure out this cipher situation.
So the word cipher got brought up in the chat. I just mentioned, I'm like, oh, it's a cipher. This isn't really a cipher. This is just a song with multiple rappers, guest appearances on it. But
okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, ciphers usually, when they're in a group, they throw on a beat and then people just go around and they rap. It's usually a freestyle thing. Generally in videos, it's depicted around a trash can with a bonfire in it and everybody's kind of in the shadows. Somebody's probably beatboxing. I liked some aspects of it because, Christmas in the Hood obviously was different because Christmas is a commercialized capitalist holiday, cosplaying as a religious holiday, and the people that are going to feel most negative about it are the have-nots, and hip-hop tends to come from a have-not aspect.
See, there's something in this song for everyone, because you just kind of did the Reverend Run and the Salt and Pepper take, like all in one right there.
I don't like the Christmas buffet hip-hop that they're offering. This is probably one of the most lackluster selections.
I think it was great.
After the holiday. Yeah, I don't.
Read through the lyrics, but
reading through the lyrics of a rap song is kind of like explaining a joke. If I have to read through the lyrics, not interested.
Well, you know what, Dave? The 80s were a more tolerant time.
No, they weren't. Okay, do we get it all out? Has everybody said their piece on Santa Baby? Jason?
Let me double check. Okay, I lied. I made it through Salt and Pepper.
Want to get that on record.
Because I was thinking, wait, Snoop was really early. How could I have gotten that annoyed by the chorus?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I realized, oh no, it was because I made it through Salt and Pepper, and then the chorus started up again, and I was like, okay, no. I think I was actually taking a shit. Real detail.
Bravo.
Because I just came in for him after work.
And you're like, I gotta wipe early to get this fucking song off my fucking Meaningful Times with Friends. We have reached the end of episode 37. I want to thank everybody. Thanks, Spoolie D. Thank Merrily Jason. Thank the Nathan Nation. I've been Mean Dave. Not to think about. Have a good one.
Oriental.